One is that a research system produces people who not only work in that system, but work in the wider economy. And I've been working long enough to recall the recession of the 1980s and to know that public R&D programs had an important benefit then of warehousing researchers. That's a phrase I like to use. It kept people productively occupied in companies on public projects who were then there ready to work when growth and markets recovered. Why do we need to do this? Why can't we simply let them go and then hire them again like the Americans do? There are often stories of people working in NASA 1 year and 6 months later selling shoes in a local shop. Well, it's because there's a big asymmetry in research. It typically takes 7 years to train a researcher and 2 years to lose those skills such that they can't be effectively re-employed. Even during maternity leaves, we have to provide specialized support to female researchers working in areas such as biotechnology so that they can keep sufficiently up with the field to return to their work. Things move very quickly. There's also a risk of a lost generation of exploitable ideas. There's been an almost freeze up of venture capital markets. Venture capitalists have not been able to sell on past startups, and therefore it's very difficult to invest in new ideas. Of course, these great ideas are still coming through at the same speed, and we need to do something about those. So that's the research system itself. But really, it's important for other reasons. It's important because this is underpinning the economy. Now, I'm going to go on a real flyer here because this is controversial territory, but there are, normally every time there is a crisis, the one thing you can be sure of is that there's an upsurge of publications about long waves in technical change. This idea is that there are long waves in the economy with a periodicity of 40 or 50 years, and originally identified by a Russian economist in the 1920s called Kondratiev, so they're sometimes called Kondratiev cycles. These have gradually merged with the thinking of the Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter to form an argument that the cycles are essentially driven by the rise of waves of new technologies, which cause the destruction of some industries which have run their course and the rise of new ones. And in this graph, you'll see somebody's version of what those are. And you could argue that what we are in is somehow one of these long-term cycles. Now, on this particular graph, the wave we're on is what we've just been hearing about: digital networks, software, new media. That could well be the case, but I think if you really want to take a flyer, you could say that at least the current generation of those has probably reached a point of commoditization. There are not large profits for companies to make. This is one of the reasons that some Far Eastern companies have been able to do so well. We've seen companies like Microsoft and Google rise on that wave. We've seen European companies, similarly, Nokia and Philips, and we used to call this the new economy. It doesn't seem so new now. Its real importance has been the transformation of the service sector, but we're now seeing the service sector acting possibly as the weakest link in the present recession. Most governments are talking about trying to rebalance their economies towards manufacturing. They're worried about exposure to services. My particular take on this, for what it's worth, there's no answer to this question, whether this wave has slowed down, but I think probably at least the current generation of technologies on which it's based has run its course, and we would need to reinvigorate it. Some of you will have heard what information technologists talk about as Moore's law, a paradigm of miniaturization, that generation after generation we can get more and more packed onto the chips, so they get cheaper, more productive, we can do more with them. There is probably still a little bit of Moore's law to run, and IT people will talk about more, and then they talk about more than more, and that's jumping into other types of technological base, perhaps biology-based electronics, perhaps what I mentioned earlier, graphene-based electronics. So this is what the Commission is facing. How can it get a grip on this? How can it somehow get Europe to have a hold on technology, to come back to a position of being one of the world's major drivers of it? We are in volume, but we're tending to lose our position at the top edge, at the leading edge. And EU 2020 placed technology very close to the center of its answers. It has its own flagship, the Innovation Union flagship, and of course it's present in a number of others: digital agenda, eco-innovation, industrial policy. You might be wondering at the picture. I spent some time looking for a nice picture of European flagships, and virtually all of them that you can find consist of a ship belonging to one European country firing cannonballs at a ship belonging to another European country. I thought that was not a good image. So this is actually HMS Beagle, the flagship for science, if you like, on Darwin's great voyage. So let me focus just on one flagship, the Innovation Union, launched in October last year with 30 points of action, which you'll be relieved I'm not going to read out. Let me just pick the three big themes that run through it. It's promising a focus on innovations which address major societal challenges. It's promising that we should broaden the concept of innovation to include social and organizational innovation, as well as technological. And it's promising to increase participation in innovation by involving all actors and all regions in innovation. Within that picture, then, it proposes certain key actions. One of the main slogans in here is that of taking things from idea to market. There is a mythology about Europe, which is called the European paradox, which says that we're very good at science, very good at inventing, and very poor at taking things through the market. Actually, if you look at the numbers, it really is a myth. We're good at both in some areas, and we're bad at both in too many areas. But this theme here is the idea that we will try to address the deficiencies and bottlenecks all the way through, from knowledge production, from investment innovation, to affecting the market into which those innovations will eventually try to be sold. One thing we found when I was working in the AHO group was that companies said their biggest barrier in Europe wasn't the supply of technology, it was the market in which they were trying to sell their innovations. They said that they could go to the USA or to China, and they would find a market 6 to 8 times as big, with one set of regulations, one set of standards, and therefore a much easier return. In Europe, fragmentation is one of the key words that we very often hear. I was on a different panel for the ICT Commissioner, and we looked at, one of the things we looked at was standards for digital signatures. We found that there were at that time 17 different standards in Europe for digital signatures. In the US there was one. So that was one theme. A second one was to revitalize the action I already mentioned, the European research area, to create what they call a single market for knowledge, research and innovation. They wanted a further shift towards the use of cohesion funds to be spent not just on roads and buildings, but on research and innovation itself.